Roy, thank you very much for sparing the time and coming to talk to me. You did your MBA at CEIBS, graduating in 2009. And you've had a very interesting journey, which has led you to engage with sustainability within a large German multinational, Covestro. And I want to get to that part of your journey. But before that, tell us a little bit about your background in terms of what happened in the lead up to getting to that job.
So I graduated in 2009, where there was a major event happened, right? So the major financial crisis that happened in 2008. Like many MBA counterparts, some of us wanted to switch career. Before MBA, I focused on the healthcare industry. So because of the financial crisis, it's very challenging for some of us to basically switch industry or basically switch roles. So I remained in the healthcare industry, but I changed my location. Before MBA, I was in Hong Kong and Taipei. And then after MBA, I stayed in Shanghai. So I stayed in the healthcare industry for a number of years until I joined a company called Baxter, where I was doing what we call intrapreneurs at Baxter China, or business model innovation at that time. Fast forward, and then there was an opportunity at Covestro, also called business model innovation, where I applied. So then I naturally went into a new industry, and therefore the chemical industry. At Covestro, my role as a business model innovation was to think about new ways to do business, or simply new business model for a chemical industry like Covestro or any other counterparts. One of the ideas at that time was to have what we call a circular business model. That was even before all the sustainability hype was at the peak, right? We're talking about 2019, 2018. There, from an idea of a circular business model with regards to material, in our case plastics, into a reality. So we also built up a sustainable business at that time, mainly serving some of our downstream industries like electronic industries, where they have a demand for what we call post-consumer recyclates in the plastic industry for applications like laptops and other consumer electronics products. So there was my start of the sustainability journey, if you will, from a business model innovation to a full-time what we call sustainability solutions role at Covestro Engineering Plastics.
Very interesting.
Entity.
This is a company that does plastics. It's a chemicals company.
Yep.
Is there a way to now add another revenue stream by maybe recycling some of these plastics and then selling this recycled product, right? So say now a little bit more about sustainability. So you already introduced this term of circularity. So that's kind of a new dimension to thinking about a business model. Maybe give us with one specific example how you were able to translate this idea into reality.
Right. There were definitely intrinsic or internal motivations for us to be more sustainable as a company and also as a business. That intrinsic motivation included, for example, a long-term vision at that time for Covestro to have. It was called "We will be fully circular." But that was a very long-term vision, right? With that, we look at the market, look at the external environment. For sure, you have the regulations, right, pouring towards chemical industry or our downstream industry for them or for us to be more sustainable in different ways. So when I said there's a market earlier on, for example, the electronic industries, right, they had a demand because of regulations, because of other motivations for more sustainable materials, in our case, sustainable plastics or recycled plastics. So there's already a market there. But the question for us is, how do we make it a sustainable business, not just from environmental perspective, but from economic perspective. So I think that's where we started. So the role of sustainability solutions for us at that time was more towards the business entity or business unit versus corporate sustainability. That was the start for that. We already had a market, so how do we capture the demand? And to a certain extent, how can we capture the demand more profitably? So I think fundamentally that was the start of the journey. At that time, we already had customers who wanted this kind of materials, but it's very costly for us to capture from the supply chain for all these sustainable materials. There's what we call the green premium. from the supply chain, right? Recycled plastics is not cheap. In many cases, it's actually more expensive, right, in terms of purchasing costs compared with our conventional or what we call virgin materials. How do we crack that economical code? By maybe transferring some of the green premium, right, to the downstream. So I think that was the more financial or commercial challenges that we face. And we continue to meet this kind of challenges still.
Yeah, what's very interesting to me is you talked about the pressures to be more sustainable, right? Especially in this industry, the chemicals industry. But it seems to me that the way you looked at it, not see this merely as obligation, but to look at it as opportunity. And that's the starting point of entrepreneurship. That's the starting point of intrapreneurship as well. It's always challenging because you're dealing with this tension between trying to do things sustainably, let's say from an environment point of view, but sustainably from an economic point of view. But I think you also came up with a way to figure this out. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that specific example.
If you ask me, I think China actually does have, in a certain extent, some most mature recycling infrastructures in the world. So the type of materials that we deal with or we produce is called polycarbonate, or PC in short form. And PC is being recycled. One example is the 19-liter water bottles that you and I would consume. And one of the biggest water bottlers and also the drinking water companies in China is called Nongfu Spring. Many people would think about, well, we remember Nongfu Spring as the small water bottles. Those are PET, right? So that's different type of materials. But the materials that we deal with is PC, the big 19-liter water bottles. At the end of life of these water bottles, they get collected back by Nongfu Spring in this case. But usually they would just sell or recycle the water bottles through local recyclers without basically knowing where they end up. When we deal with sustainable materials, these are the end-of-life materials that we pursue anyway. So usually we pursue it through recyclers. Nongfu Spring also being one of our customers who would consume our virgin polycarbonate, right? Then we thought, why don't we talk to them not just as a customer, but as a potential supplier of such recycled plastics?
Right.
So fast forward, we signed a deal with Nongfu Spring to collect almost all of the end-of-life water bottles as one of our raw materials or feedstocks. I think there's a few advantages for this model. One, you know who they are, you know where the sources are, and you know who the sources are. So for recycled plastics, it's very important for traceability and also for the stability of the quality.
Right.
So you know where they're coming from, you know what kind of quality they are. So it's better for us to do sort of quality control with such a traceable source. Not only that, so we later found out there are also customers, and in this case again, Chinese, maybe consumer brands, who not only got attracted by the fact that, hey, this is a recycled plastics, but the fact that this is coming from Nongfu Spring, who they could have a potential to do co-branding.
Right.
When they use these recycled water bottles, they, through us, talk to Nongfu Spring and say, hey, can we do some co-promotion, co-branding? And in this case, Nongfu Spring said yes. So in those products, there are luggages, there are stationery, there are different consumer products who use this kind of recycled plastics and then co-branded with Nongfu Spring, which is a household brand that facilitated, I think, the marketing side or the promotional side of such sustainable products.
See, this is very fascinating. So the starting point is being entrepreneurial within a big company. You see this opportunity to say, hey, we can recycle plastics and, you know, actually perhaps sell them at a premium, I assume. That's what you had indicated, right? There's the green premium. And so this is also then adding an additional business model based on circularity, generating a new revenue stream. But what you're also describing is a topic that's very close to my heart, which is partnering, right? Engaging with other companies. So first of all, you turn your customer into your supplier, but the story doesn't end in that dyad, in that two-actor partnership. And so that's very interesting because now you become sort of a convener of companies coming together, and you're talking about a luggage brand that's doing this, a stationery brand. it seems to me that the role of the intrapreneur is not just about, here's this new business model, this new revenue generating opportunity. It seems to be also about engaging with a new emergent ecosystem almost and making it come alive.
So first of all, I think this ecosystem exists. I don't think anyone or any organization have a sole power to create an ecosystem. I think ecosystem exists, but with the experience, right, Novo Spring and many others, the question would be the role of different companies within that ecosystem. Is it very obvious or is it very intuitive, right? So I think when we call business model innovation, right, the innovative part also comes in, right? So how do you see a typical customer's role would change, like you said, right? So it changes not from a customer to a supplier, but also co-market partner, right? So I think there are different companies exist in the ecosystem, but how do you do the link? And what roles would each of us play in the game, so to speak, right? I think fundamentally for us is to promote more sustainable solutions upstream, downstream. And only promoting it through individual intrinsic motivation is not enough. Only promote it with compliance to regulatory is not enough. It's not fun enough. Looking for these missing links, so to speak, and then play around with ecosystem would be very cool.
And the kinds of companies you mentioned, like Nongfu Springs or the luggage company, which I presume is Chinese.
Yes.
These kinds of companies we observe to move very fast. Western multinationals, not quite so. People have ideas within these multinationals in their Chinese subsidiaries, but are not able to act upon them and move fast. But this is a case where you've been able to do this. Say a little bit more about how you've been able to be an intrapreneur in a Western multinational subsidiary in China.
Externally, there needs to be, like I said, right, a mature infrastructure, whatever that is. In our case, it's a recycling infrastructure.
And you're saying that's mature in China?
Right. So recycling already exists for a material like polycarbonate that we deal with. So at least you have a playing field to work on. I think for us, one of the major challenges in different regions is the maturity level of a recycling infrastructure, for example, is not the same. A circular model can be thought about or dreamt about in different regions. But in reality, if you want to trigger the execution, maybe sometimes because of the lack of maturity in the recycling market would hinder the execution. So I think that's number one. It also happens that in our business entity, the global headquarters is here in Shanghai, so you have faster decision making.
That makes a huge difference.
Right.
So in fact, it's not even a subsidiary, right? It's a case where the Western multinational chose to move their headquarters. Now that's very interesting.
Yeah. So for example, my role is a global role and I'm based in Shanghai. The global side of us can, propose and make bigger decisions strategically, but the local side of us can also find opportunities to also implement this locally. For example, Novo Spring case is a classic one because everybody can dream about a circular model. Everybody can strategize what a circular business model should be from the headquarter perspective. But then locally, where and how and who do you work with, right, to execute that? I think luckily it's the perfect blend for us to be able to implement this in China.
Western executives listening to this should realize that actually their Chinese operations need a lot of autonomy. And that's something you've been able to benefit from because then you can act decisively, you can act fast, and that's what this local market requires. Plus, this market has certain advantages, certain infrastructures, and so on. I see this as business being a force for good in China. Very interesting to see all of these different elements coming together. The things we talk about in class about being more entrepreneurial, driving business model innovation, but linking that to sustainability outcomes in a way that the company benefits. Presumably, the additional revenue stream is economically significant, but society benefits as well. And so the tendency very often is to emphasize one over the other, and I think there is a tension, but to the extent that both can be pursued together. And I think also when you talk to social entrepreneurs or companies who don't have the baggage of a big, large bureaucratic organization, you hear some very inspiring stories. We're making products with completely sustainable, biodegradable materials and so on. They are built like that from the ground up. And, they are more agile. They have certain other challenges like attracting resources and financial capital. But the challenge I've often seen is in the larger established companies to be able to effect change. So this is very interesting to listen to this. But I'm hoping that it's not just senior executives in multinationals who will be listening to your story, Roy, but also current MBA students, prospective MBA students, maybe relatively recent MBA graduates. And one of the things I find is sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect in the minds of young people in terms of the importance of sustainability, which I think they get intuitively, but the relevance they perceive to their first job, after an MBA, because, and quite understandably, people take on this massive investment of time and money to do an MBA with a view to turbocharging their career. And sometimes they have the impression that sustainability can wait. I will do this later in life. But sustainability seems to be very integral to your own career and your career success. And presumably that is something that young MBAs should be more mindful of.
I think a lot of companies, when they see the sustainability challenge, besides the regulatory compliance, they are figuring out, as well as we are, how do we make this, as I said, economically sustainable? And a lot of skill sets, a lot of solutions lie in a typical business education, right? You have the marketing, you have supply chain, you have operational efficiency, organizational behavior, change management. All these skills should be able to be applied and solve these, sustainability challenges within organization. So I keep wondering, first of all, why business schools won't have more academic curriculum over that. This is a fundamental skill for most of the career choices for MBA graduates. Whether or not the job that you apply for carry a sustainability title or not. Within our organization, I personally think a lot of us are dealing with sustainability challenges, full-time or part-time, right? For us, for me, it's a full-time thing, but for a lot of my peers, it's a part-time thing. Do they have the right sustainability mindset, business acumen or business skill set to solve the common sustainability challenges, right? So it's a very good add-on for all MBA graduates to have that sort of capability in their pocket when they face an interview, whether or not, again, this is a sustainability role or not, I think you can shine. And then it could help your career go, right? So for me, as much as I'm exposed to the external market or the downstream market, my natural career would be something more towards the sales side, more towards the marketing side, for example. So that could be a career role, right? As much as a vertical career role, like a chief sustainability officer, right? A lot of organizations have that kind of senior role, senior management role that has full-time sustainability responsibility.
Right.
That could be a very good career path, again, with a business school education as well.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So in the end, the business fundamentals are so important, right? But it seems to me that what you're suggesting is that in the end, it's really about a mindset, and it's about thinking about sustainability not as something separate to the core of the business, but something that is deeply integrated. And you, Roy, are living that out and showing how it can be done. So thank you very much for sharing your story, and more power to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.